Well, I have with me Buck Owens, one of America's favorites. Buck is an American country music tradition, legend, and all that sort of thing. Buck, how you doing?
Ralph, I'm doing fine, and I'm really happy to be here. Nice to see you.
Still live in Bakersfield?
Still live in Bakersfield. I've lived there for a long time, and uh, and I still enjoy it. It's kind of a slow, easy going town, but it's growing a lot now. L.A. is coming over the hill, and a lot of people living there and working in L.A. and looks like it's going to grow out of the little town. Maybe one of these days I'll have to find a smaller place.
Do you live on a farm or ranch
Yeah,
near Bakersfield?
about 15, 20 miles outside, Ralph, and have all kind of animals and stuff, and I really enjoy it out there.
Are you telling me you are a working farmer or cowboy?
No, no, I'm a gentleman. I'm a gentleman rancher is the way I refer to myself. I would have been a cowboy, but I was too scared. I was too it's chicken. I love those things, but horses I've been kind to me really. I've been hurt by horses several different times. I've been thrown and thrashed and jumped on and fell on and all those kind of things. But I always liked them, and we still have about 10 or 12 of them. But that's the only reason I wasn't a cowboy. I was scared.
You're from Sherman, Texas, aren't you?
Yes, I am.
Is that rodeo country?
Not really. That's just farm country. My folks we farmed on the halves there, what they called sharecropping. I never heard of the sharecropping thing but farming on the halves was the same thing, I guess. And then we moved from there down by Dallas, a town called Garland, and then at the age of 7 we started for California and broke down and right outside of Phoenix in a town called Mesa. And I was raised there, and at the age of 21, I went on to Bakersfield. The reason being, we'd been through there a lot of times. We were what they called fruit tramps. We followed the harvest. We were the migrant workers, and even when we stayed in Arizona, we would go to California to pick up potatoes, pick cotton, pick peaches, cut grapes. And so I had lots of different jobs when I was a kid.
Who is we?
My mother, dad, my 2 sisters, and my brother, and a lot of relatives, second cousins, first cousins, aunts, uncles, grandma. My grandpa had died in Texas, and so there's all of us, all my mother's brothers and sisters, and all those.
Is that because there wasn't a lot of work back around Sherman, Texas?
Well, there was hardly any work. I remember hearing them say that my daddy got $16 a month, and all the milk you could drink and all the eggs you could eat, and we had an old house that we lived in. It was in the time of the Great Depression in the 30s, and I remember well. It was tough.
When did you start your musical career? Did you start it in Bakersfield?
Actually, Ralph, I started at about 15, 16 years of age. All of my people played. My father played the French harp, and my mother played the piano in the churches where we'd go. She was a good gospel piano player. And my uncles all played the guitar. One of them played the mandolin. Some of them played fiddle. And then I started, I had rheumatic fever when I was about 15, and the doctor said, you're never going to be able to do anything heavy, so you better get to doing, what about that mandolin that you play? I played the mandolin a little bit. So this guy by the name of Thurl Ray Britton, we had a radio show called on KTYL. It was called the world's first drive-in radio station. And
what does that mean?
Well, it means that they had a great big studio. It was about 20, 30 foot wide with a great big plate glass window in it, and you could come at a drive-in theater, and you could drive in and park there, and you could watch them perform and listen to them on the radio. You hear the sound on the radio.
Oh,
and
I didn't realize that went on.
It's the only one I ever saw. And then we had a show called Buck and Britt's show, and just the man on the guitar, and he sang. I didn't sing. And then we started going to the little joints, and we had a soup bowl. The bartender used to pass it for us, and that was the first money I ever made. I was about 16.
Was this in Bakersfield?
No, this was still in Mesa and
In
Phoenix.
Mesa. Did you ever work for Wynn Stewart?
No, I never worked for Wynn Stewart, but I worked with Wynn Stewart for a lot of times. And about 1955, Wynn Stewart came to the Blackboard. It was a place where I worked for 7 years, and he came there, and on a jam session. We did a jam session on Sunday afternoon where all the pickers and singers would come, and they'd get up and sing, he and I became friends there, and he was working at a place called George's Roundup down in Long Beach. I went down there to see him, and he'd come up, and Ralph Mooney played steel guitar in his band.
I know, I remember that.
And Bobby Austin played bass, and so then he would come to see me on Sunday afternoon, and I was off on Monday, but I usually worked. Sometimes I would go and see Wynn, and then one day Wynn brought Harlan Howard up to Bakersfield. This is about '56, and he and I wrote. I think the first song we ever wrote, Wilma Lee and Stoney Cooper recorded, called "Train You Took My Baby," and then we wrote the one for Kitty Wells, "Mommy for a Day," and that was our first big success. And then of course that's the way that I met Wynn. And then later on in the '60s, then I played on all of Wynn's records, and he did some of my songs and stuff. But Wynn Stewart was a great talent, and he has not been given his rightful due for the West Coast country sound. He certainly needs to share in the West Coast country sound as much as anybody else.
His early records featured Ralph Mooney on steel.
Yes.
At Capitol, and then later, just a short time later, you came along with Under Your Spell and those records, and they also featured Ralph Mooney on steel.
Yes, and then Hag too. All of Hag's early records.
Let me say this: Ralph Mooney today plays for Waylon Jennings,
and has for about 20 years.
But he really had a great steel guitar sound.
Oh, and still does. Still does. He's on some of the cuts of the Hot Dog album. He's playing steel guitar on some of those. I flew him out to the coast, and we just had a big old time.
So you had a nice reunion then.
Oh yes, Ralph he missed a plane, and he got there a little bit late, but it worked out. But Wynn Stewart was very unique. He was a small fellow, and we used to do a TV show in Oklahoma City. I called the Buck Owens Ranch Show. It was on for many years, and he and I would sing. We sang a duet or two, and because the difference in the height, we used to put Wynn on a Coke box, and every once in a while we'd flash a picture of it on the screen, But he just laughed. He didn't really have any hang-ups about being short, I told him, at least you're taller than Jimmy Dickens.
Buck, at one time, were you a Los Angeles session musician?
Well, I was actually, I guess you could call me that. I commuted. I would work. It's like sessions. It's the same thing as today, I think, with the sessions players. They've all been pickers and singers and songwriters, and they found a good way to make a living. My only problem was I would work, for 4 or 5 days. I might even work every day for 2 weeks. But then all of a sudden, you wouldn't get a call for 3 weeks, And I was married and had a couple of kids, and it was pretty tough to turn loose the honky-tonk job, which lucky I did, and that's where I got to learn my trade. And
whose records did you play on?
Oh, I played on I had so many. Ralph, I played on from Stan Freberg, of course, Sonny James and Farron Young and Wynn Stewart and all of those, and Stan Frebergs and Wanda Jacksons, Gene Shepard's. Ferlin Husky, just about everybody that came there, and then a lot of David Frizzell. We after a little later on, when he started recording for Columbia, I helped out a little bit.
You mean
there.
David or Lefty?
No, David. He was with CBS very early there for just a record or two,
Didn't he do a recording of L.A. International Airport, which
yes, he did. He was the first.
Which Susan later did.
Yeah, he was the first, and then I covered it with Susan. Actually, David's, I guess it just was a girl's song or something, because David made a real good record of that. And then he made a good record of the B.J. Thomas song. I can't think of can't think of it, but I played on Gene Vincent's, a lot of those things, a lot of lovin', and Tommy Sands, and all those things, and I really enjoyed it. It was a big kick.
I imagine many people are wondering if you're going to make another record with Dwight Yoakam.
Well, I might. I hadn't. We didn't have it planned, but I might do that. What I'm into today, Ralph, is having fun. I'm not. If it's a fun thing to do, then maybe I would do it. I really think lots of Dwight. I love Dwight Yoakam, and I think he has a lot of talent. And as I said last year, I thought he could be the big guy in country music this year. But Dwight does not. He doesn't want it as bad as I wanted it. He doesn't want it as bad as Hag wanted it. He doesn't want it bad enough to go out and stay out on the road and go do all the things. He wants to go out and make a tour, one big long tour, say for 3 months, and then he don't want to hear or see anybody else for 9. And maybe he can do it that way. But
Has he told you that he does not like the road?
Oh, yes, he's told me very emphatically in language that I wouldn't mention to you. The people do not realize, as you and I do, how hard it is to fight the airplanes and the sky cabs and the taxi drivers and the promoters, the concert stages, the hotels, the bell captains, the maids, the room service. Those things are really a lot of hassle.
Sometimes they're good, sometimes they're not good.
Yes, and when they're not good, sometimes they're really not good.
Also, you did not mention the one thing that I think a lot of entertainers fight, and that's the loneliness.
Oh.
Even though you've got a band with you, you're the captain,
Yes.
and you may not want to run with the band. I assume that's what happens.
Well, yeah, I always ran with the band, but I know a lot of guys do not want to. Maybe they don't have anything in common, but I still do that. But especially through the '60s and the early '70s, and I think mainly because of Don Rich, of course. But Tom Bromley is a nice man. Willie Cantu, really, all of them nice people. Doyle Holly, I always got along great with Doyle. He was the bad boy of the band, and a real good, talented young man, though. But it gets so boring. It gets so lonely, boring. The walls start closing in on you, and pretty soon, I think the boredom is what gets me, and boredom and the loneliness go hand in hand and makes it even worse. It depresses me. I'd rather be real busy. Let me go do something.
That's interesting because this came up recently with another entertainer, and I've done so many interviews I can't remember who it was. He said the same exact thing. He said, "You go through all of this boredom, this loneliness, this hassle to do an hour on stage."
Yeah. The hour is not the work. The hour is the fun part. And I've always said that. But you go through 23 hours for 1 hour, and the 1 hour is I look at it like this, and I still do, that it's 23 to 1 odds, and that's not very good, I don't believe. But I love it when I get there, when I do it, and for a little while afterwards, you're wired up from the audience, and then pretty soon you go to sleep, and the next day,
You do it again.
Yeah, you go to, it's something. It's a love-hate thing, I think, Rob.
I'm visiting with Buck Owens, and Buck, I want to talk about Ringo Starr.
Okay.
Your new album, Act Naturally, which I think is kind of interesting. You've had that tune in your catalog for 100 years, it seems. You've been singing that song forever. And yet your new album is called Act Naturally.
Yes.
When did you first release Act Naturally?
1963, first part of '63.
So we're talking 26 years ago.
26 years ago.
And did you ever have another album called Act Naturally?
No.
And then the Beatles did the same song when?
'65.
Okay. Recently, somebody, and you'll have to tell me who or what or how this idea was created, someone put you together with Ringo Starr.
Well, Ralph, I'm an old. I love music. I love good rock music, and I've always said that. I always liked music with a good beat. And the old-time rock and rollers, Eddie Cochran used to come by the blackboard there where I played before he ever got to Summertime Blues. And I liked a lot of those things, and I think a lot of them dug me, somewhat. And so they called me from San Francisco the first part of this year, being 1989, and they asked if I would come up and be part of this big presentation. It's called the BAMMys. It's put on by a big, huge rock and roll outfit magazine that they give away. They give awards for. It's called Bay Area Music, is what BAM means, and that's where it started. But it's all over L.A. and San Diego and everything. So I said, yeah, that sounds like fun. I'd do that. I'd perform at their show, you know. Huey Lewis and John Fogerty and Neil Young and Santana, and you know, Linda Ronstadt was there, and so then they called back and said, "Would you do a duet with Ringo Starr on Act Naturally?" And I said, "Sure, that'll be fun." So when I got there, of course, Ringo wasn't there, and so, but I went back home after that, and it dawned on me that I was going to do a tour of Europe at the last part of March, the first part of April. So I thought that I had recorded Act Naturally and Ringo had done the same, and both had been very successful. So I called up Ringo, and I said, "Ringo, you know, you want to have some fun?" That was my opening line. He said, "Sure." And so I said, I told him, I said what I wanted to do, and he said, "Yeah, it sounds like fun. Let's do it." So I told him when I'd be there, and I made arrangements for the Abbey Road Studios, and he said he'd be there at 11 o'clock. I thought he would come with an entourage. He came all alone, and he came at 11 o'clock, and he signed autographs and took pictures. Very amiable fella.
Now wait a minute. Who's there? Who's he signing autographs for?
Oh well, everybody that went from my group and from the tour. Everybody they wanted us all to meet Ringo.
Oh, okay, I got you.
And they signed for my band, for the tour manager, for their grandkids, and Ringo says, "You don't look old enough to have grandkids," and she says, "Oh, I don't. I'm not even married, but I will someday." And she, you know, that really happened. But he took pictures and he did all those things, and was very, very, very sweet about it. I think Ringo is the most famous, approachable person, or I should say, the most approachable, famous person I've ever met.
You cut Act Naturally with him at the Abbey Road Studios, which is where the Beatles made their records.
Yes.
A lot of history there.
Ho, it reeked.
On that session, did you record anything besides Act Naturally?
No, that's all we did. And now I'm sad about that. I wish we had lots of time. He said he would come at 11, and I said, "Well, we'll be ready." And we went over at 9, and by 10 we had everything all set up, and by the time he got there, we had the track and everything all done. All he and I had to do was sing it, and that took some doing, you know. But I got him to make some doodles on the drums for me, and I thought that would be fun to have, and we turned on the tape machine after a little bit and let it run, and so we got a lot of one-liners from Ringo, but they're not really repeatable.
After you made the record with him in London, he came to the United States to make the video for Act Naturally. Tell me about that.
Well, Ringo seemed to be, we had never met. Ringo and I had never met when we talked on the phone. We talked 2 or 3 different times, and I said to him, "If the record comes off well, let's make a video." And he thought about it for a minute, and he says, No, I'm in for the record, just the record right now. So the last thing he said at the studio when we made the record, he said, "Make me sound good now." So when I sent him the cassette, and he heard what we'd done with it, and of course we brought it back here and mastered it in Nashville, and when he heard that, and so I wrote him a little note and said, "Call me when you get it after you play it." For about 30 to 40 seconds, all he did was chuckle and laugh.
You mean when he called you?
Yes, he was still playing it, and he was so thrilled with the way it sounded, how good it sounded, and everything. And so then I said, "Now, what about a video?" And he said, "Yeah, I'd be in for that." But before that, he's pretty suspicious. I think he's probably got reason to be too. But
you mean you think a lot of people have tried to take advantage of him?
I think there's probably been a lot of people who want to get a piece of the Beatles and Ringo, you know.
I'm talking to Buck Owens. Are we going to talk here about another singing partner, Buck?
Yeah.
I mean, you've sung with Ringo, and you've sung with Dwight, and well, you've sung with a lot of people. On your new album, you're singing with Emmylou Harris, "Crying
Yes,
Time."
yes.
Who else?
Well, George Jones. Uh, this last summer, I, I I finally finished up this new album. It's and called Act Naturally. I just got it finished, and now I'm going home. I've been playing dates up in Michigan and Minnesota and places, and making the album. And man, I've been gone from home 2 weeks, and that's the longest I've been gone from home since I used to do tours. 10 years prior, and so and the telephone rings here while at my room here in Nashville, and it's George Jones, and he says, I've been wanting to do a duet with you for 20 years. And I said, well, George, why didn't you tell me? He said, I'm telling you. And that, just the way the conversation went. And so he said, let's you and me sing Love's Gonna Live Here. Let's make a duet out of it. And I said, okay, that just thrilled me to death. And he said, tomorrow. And I said, George, I'm going home tomorrow. And he said, well, we'll do it in the morning. And I said, George, no, I'm going home. He said, well, what about if I record it here? I'll send you the tape to Bakersfield. You put your voice on there, bring it back here. So that's what we did. And but I told him, I said, I have this thing out with Ringo, and I got a thing on here with Emmylou I might want to do something with. So I can't do it for a single, but we'll do it for an album. He said, okay, that'd be fine. 2 days after he got it back, and I guess they mixed it and everything, he said, they want to release, back on the phone, he said, they want to release it for a single. And I said, well, George, you remember our conversation? And he said, yeah, I remember it all right. He said, he remembers a lot of things. But so I said, well, let me check with, let me think about it a little bit. So a couple of days later, I called him back and told him, go ahead and do it. I don't know if they're going to do it, but that's over at CBS, but it would really be fun. And it is a fun record. George and I had a big time.
Now, George's phrasing is unlike anybody else's. Did you sing the harmony?
I did sing the harmony. I sang the harmony where he sang the lead, and then he sang the harmony where I sang the lead. But I was very careful to do it real straight. But he wasn't very careful. I mean, it was different. But I've been around George for so long and heard him sing for so long. But he still is terribly hard to anticipate. You just have to listen to how he does it and then go back and do it each time. Because even if he does Love Is Gonna Live Here, the one time he said, Love's Gonna Live Here Again. Next time he said, Love Is Gonna Live Here Again. I got to sing harmony to this, But it worked out real good. It sounded really great.
I'm looking forward to hearing that.
Billy Sherrill sent me a copy of it, and I'm really thrilled about that.
Buck, I want to ask you about winning over the people who do not like country music or say they don't.
Well, how many times I've had people come up to me after a show or write me a letter or a note or something and say they'd never been to a country music show before, or they'd always thought they didn't like country music. I think it's because sometimes some of the image, I think that they see people a lot of times that are not familiar with what we do. When you say something country or you hear some raunchy guitar thing or something, people get visions in their mind of a guy riding up all dressed in black leathers, and he's got a skeleton across his chest, and he's riding right into their living room. I think they envision some of that when they come across the radio like that. And it's not like that at all. And then they go out to see a country music show, and especially some country music shows. I know Dwight, there's a lot of people that goes to Dwight shows that claim they're not country music fans. And I see people all the time. I'll go places, and I see it as a challenge. I like to go I go play these rock and roll places, and I enjoy them. I already know that there's going to be some people that hangs out. I'm talking about if you want to go have some fun in a good old get-down honky-tonk place that holds 300 or 400 people. And you get them swinging from the rafters, and pretty soon, you see people that I've seen people that swore they's never going to like country music turn into liking it. So I always see that as a challenge, and I think I immediately think when they say they don't like country music, in my head, I cannot fathom people not liking country music.
Buck, did you ever make a record under another name?
Oh, yeah. I made one under the name of Corky Jones.
Yes.
You want me to tell you that story?
Yeah, and Buck Owen, I mean, George Jones also made a record under another name.
What was his other name? I've forgotten.
Thumper, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think it was. Did he do it for the same reason I did?
I assume to get in on the
Rockabilly?
the rockabilly craze.
Yeah, I think so. I think he did. Well, Elvis was so hot. Oh, listen. I mean, he was so hot, and all the young country musicians at that time kind of got into rock and roll, They wanted to be rock and roll and wear white. As a matter of fact, I had a pair of white bucks, of white shoes that I wore a few times, and I had a ducktail. But the country guys, we didn't have a country station back in the late 50s and the mid to late 50s. This guy over here would have an hour on this station in the morning, and there'd be another guy over here have an hour and a half in the afternoon. There'd be somebody have one at night, and these guys all took offense to anything that was kind of rock and roll or rockabilly or Elvisy or Little Richard or Chuck Berry, and so I did this song called Hot Dog, and I did it under the name of Corky Jones.
Was this the same hot dog we heard last year?
Very same, the very same. Immediately after I did this song, but we was hoping to get some of the rockabilly, rock and roll play, and but that didn't happen. But it happened. Everything turned out all right. But I was a little upset because a couple of weeks after I'd done it, the guy Claude Cavaness, the guy that started Pamper Music. He was the guy that had this Pep record label, and he sent me a record of a cover record called, the guy's name Pecos Pete and the Jets, who were an all black R&B group. Now they've covered Hot Dog, and so but nothing ever happened for them either on the song. And then of course earlier about the early '80s, Shakin' Stevens, the big rock and roll group in Europe and England. They made a #1 record out of Hot Dog over there. And so I thought when I started back to record that, hey, let me do Hot Dog. And we did it, and of course not much happened to it. People liked the video, but it's kind of like it's a tough time right now for me in radio because I think they look upon me as, if not a has-been, I think they look upon me as something that their radio stations can do without. And
Didn't Hot Dog play well?
Yes, it played well. Act Naturally played well, but they didn't. Me, if it don't make #1, it's a failure, and that's going to be difficult. Dwight and I were lucky to make #1 with Streets of Bakersfield.
Well, I think radio likes you, Buck, or they wouldn't have played Act Naturally, Streets of Bakersfield.
Well, but there's about
Hot Dog.
Yeah, but it's about 25% of the people that won't touch a Buck Owens record.
Well, I think what has happened, I think you have to re-educate a lot of the young people who are in radio, who were not in radio when you were so big.
Yes.
I think that's the problem.
Well, I'm sure. A lady wrote me a letter the other day, and I was amazed. I mean, it's just amazing. I kept the letter. I'm going to put it in a museum one of these days. And she said that she'd heard a record that she thought I ought to record, and it was Above and Beyond by a young man named Rodney Crowell, and I should record it. It's the truth. I got the letter. And, she said that it sounded like me and that I ought to record it. And I thought,
Yeah, and Paul Franklin sounded like Ralph Mooney, too.
Yeah, yes, he did. I told him I was going to tell Rodney I'm going to send him a bill for the arrangement.
Buck, I thank you very much. I've enjoyed our talk.
Ralph, thank you. It's always a pleasure to get to visit with you. You're a terrific interviewer. You're one of those guys that asks questions and let the guy run. And I'm one of the guys now why you tape it. Thanks a lot, Ralph.
Thank you, Buck.